Supreme Court rejects call to overturn its decision legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. The Supreme Court today rejected a call to overturn its landmark decision that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. It didn't reject the call per se. It rejected to even hear the call. So, I don't know. I'm going to get a little more specific. The justices, without comment, turned away an appeal from Kim Davis, the former Kentucky county clerk, who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples after the High Court's 2015 ruling in Obergefell versus Hodges. Davis had been trying to get the court to overturn a lower court order for her to pay $360,000 in damages and attorney fees to a couple denied a marriage license. So in 2015, Obergefell wins, and same-sex marriage is basically legalized across the states. Kim Davis here decides she's not going to, as a county clerk, hand out the papers, the marriage license, and she gets sued, and now she owes $360,000 in damages and attorney fees. Now, personally, I think the damages are just stupid. Attorney fees make sense, but I don't know, like, what damages? You still got married. I don't think she should have been thrown in jail. I think she should have just been fired, and we should have just gone from there. But here we are. She appeals. We get to the Supreme Court, or she gets it all the way to the Supreme Court to look at the argument to see if they'll hear the argument. So they were listening to the argument to see if they'll listen to the argument. I don't know. It's fun. They decided against it. Now, they needed 4 votes for it to actually go to a case, to actually like get to be for the appeal to go before the Supreme Court. That means 3 or less of the judges actually voted to hear on this. I'm going to assume that Alito and Clarence Thomas voted yes on this, and I would assume maybe one of the other conservative justice. I'd rule out Amy Coney Barrett. I don't think she did, and I kind of doubt Kavanaugh did. Roberts probably didn't, so Gorsuch. Maybe, but everyone else voted no for sure, because here we are. And why this matters, okay? This matters because it should and always it should be a states' rights issue, or at the very least, the House and the Senate need to actually pass a law that would make it so. The Supreme Court, in my opinion, doesn't get to just rule that it is the case. I think this was a bunk decision by the Supreme Court. I think it's just as bunk as the abortion. Okay, it is a states' rights issue. I will actually say I think that abortion has more of an argument that it's a federal issue than it does a states issue compared to marriage. Okay, marriage is, in my opinion, definitively only a states issue. Now, even if it got overturned, what would that mean? Okay, in Utah, it would mean that the amendment that we passed years ago, I think it was 2004, that marriage is between a man and a woman would come back into play. There's no laws that would allow for same-sex couples in Utah to get married. So if it got overturned, Utah would return to marriages between a man and a woman. And if someone wanted to get married, they could leave the state, go get married somewhere else. They'd come back, and it would have to be recognized in Utah. Why? Well, because in 2022, the federal government, our Congress, actually passed the Respect for Marriage Act. What does this do? Specifically, the act replaces provisions that define, for purposes of federal law, marriage as between a man and a woman and spouse as a person of the opposite sex, with provisions that recognize any marriage between 2 individuals that is valid under state law. So it, for federal purposes, changed what marriage means. So on the state level, again, if this were overturned, Utah defines marriage between a man and a woman. Federally, they define marriage as any union, and they would recognize it from any state. Then, the act also replaces provisions that do not require states to recognize same-sex marriage from other states with provisions that prohibit the denial of full faith and credit or any right or claim relating to out-of-state marriages on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, or national origin. Yeah, I'll read this. The Supreme Court held that state laws barring same-sex marriages were unconstitutional in Obergefell. The court held that state law barring interracial marriages were unconstitutional in Loving v. Virginia, and the act allows the Department of Justice to bring a civil action and establish a private right of action for violation. So the act does not affect religious liberties or conscious protections that are available under the Constitution or federal law. It requires it does not require religious organizations to provide goods or services to formally recognize or celebrate a marriage and affect any benefits or rights that do not arise from marriage. So this kind of takes me back to the Andrew Wilson versus Gregg debate. Andrew Wilson's right. It should be a religious situation. The whole reason the government's even getting involved is because they're not recognizing marriage as a religious situation. They're recognizing it as the state, common law. So if it got overturned, states would have to recognize out-of-state licenses, but they would not be forced to issue those licenses themselves, but they'd have to recognize the license from somewhere else. Again, meaning in Utah, you could leave the state to get married. Now, here's the deal. If it did get overturned, I think apparently Utah would change its laws. This is in 2022 when that law was passed. Do Utahns support same-sex marriages? Well, let's scroll down. Do you agree or disagree that marriages between same-sex couples should be recognized by the law as valid with the same rights as traditional marriage? 50% strongly agree. So we'll just say in a majority in this case. The majority strongly agree. An additional 22% somewhat agree. So now we're at 72% of Utahns agree that marriage should be that it should be recognized just the same as traditional marriage. 9% somewhat disagree, 14% strongly disagree. Personally, I'm part of the strongly disagree only for the sake of what does marriage mean, and marriage should be religious. So it's not that I'm saying that like same-sex couples can't do what they want and have recognition that's kind of like a marriage, but I think marriage is a religious thing. Okay, it's kind of like saying that the state has to force, I mean, in this case, I recognize that the state isn't forcing religions to marry these individuals, but they're allowed to be married by the state. So this would be saying that like, well, religious institutions do baptisms. I want to get baptized. I just don't want to do it under a religion. So the state should baptize me. Okay. That to me, it sounds ridiculous, but that's how I view the marriage situation. Marriage is a religious thing. It's a religious ceremony. It should be recognized by religions. And to be honest, I just think the states should be out of it. They're not. So that's why we get to deal with this issue and why everyone's trying to push for like, well, I have a right or I don't have a right or whatever. And I think this is also why many Utahns strongly agree or somewhat agree is because we've stopped recognizing it as a religious institution, or not as an institution, sorry, as a religious ceremony. So here we are. There we go. Here's the actual order. I just wanted to pull this up. Just I like to present this. So this is the court order for today, and this is Kim Davis versus David Emerald. I don't know how to say that. The motion of Foundation for Moral Law for leave to file a brief as amicus curiae out of time is denied. So the Foundation for Moral Law was trying to submit arguments as to why they were on Kim Davis's side. They wanted that to be heard in the arguments that the Supreme Court were going to listen to or read. And that was denied because they submitted it out of time. They didn't do it in the appropriate time limit. Then the petition for a writ of cert is denied for Kim specifically. So both were denied. No one said anything. And again, we don't know who voted or didn't vote. I'm going to put it this way, though. John Roberts, I think he sides with precedent, so he's not going to overturn anything. I think Thomas, he hated it then. I think he still hates it now. Alito, I think he would have voted for it as well to hear the argument. Sotomayor wouldn't have. Kagan wouldn't have. Gorsuch is my big maybe. I'd lean toward he actually probably did vote. I think it was probably like a 3-6 vote, and he was the third. Kavanaugh, I don't think he would. Amy Coney Barrett, I think that she is scared of what the left has done, especially after the abortion. I think that she is, a lot of people were telling me like, hey, she's very religious. She's a Catholic. She's going to vote because of it'd be the wrong thing to do. And marriage is between a man and a woman, blah, blah, blah. I've heard those arguments, but she, in my opinion, almost always will side with precedent. The abortion one, she didn't side with because it should have been strictly left to the Congress and the Senate. Okay, lawmakers, legislatures should have done something about it. She recognized that. That's why she helped with overturning Roe v. Wade. Jackson, she wouldn't have, and then we get into retired. So Yeah, I don't know. I look at all of this and I look at this, and from my opinion, in my last video, like I said on this, I don't think it's getting overturned. It obviously isn't now. This opens the, I mean, it didn't close the door, so like technically it could still be overturned in some point in the future. It's not like they turned it down and said we'll never address this. Like there's a possibility. I just, again, I don't think it's going to happen. Too many of the judges prefer precedent over doing, in my opinion, just like what's the right thing. And part of the reason they want to side with precedent is to show strength, because it's the only way that our judges can show strength, because they have no enforcement arm. Because they have no enforcement arm, they kind of have to agree with each other and be like, well, we made a past decision, we got to stick with it, right? So they look unified, at least in some degree. My personal opinion, just do what's right. Okay. And I think that's the problem with all of American politics, is there's too many individuals who don't have a moral backbone, do not have actual standing character. And we see that with the Republicans and the Democrats right now fighting over the government shutdown, which, like, when I talk to people, no one cares. Everyone forgets that we're even shut down. Of course, it mattered with SNAP. That was a big deal because there's individuals that are suffering. So, of course, people in America are going to be like, oh, the government's still shut down and they're going to lose their benefits. Like, that's crazy. But then they stopped caring. Now we're seeing flights get canceled, so Americans are going to care again. And I don't know, they still haven't done anything. In my opinion, Republicans should have some moral fortitude, and they're acting like they do, but they don't. They need to remove the filibuster, and they need to pass the laws that they were voted in to do. Okay, this happened in 2016. Donald Trump won. The Senate was Republican. The House was Republican. They did nothing. Nothing was done. Nothing was accomplished. Okay. Trump gets in again. Now we have a conservative judiciary. We have a conservative House, and we have a conservative Senate, and Donald Trump's in the president as running, at least as a conservative. And there are actually things getting done, but I'm going to argue this. It's almost all Donald Trump. The things that are getting done are almost all Donald Trump. The big, beautiful bill, it was partially because of Donald Trump. Okay, but it also just increased our spending, which is why all the Republicans were like, yeah, we're for it, right? The Republicans, in my opinion, act as a pressure release. I think that they're all in on it, and not like 100%, literally every single one of them, but the majority of them, as a government, as our corporations, as the bureaucracy, they're individuals with controlling interests that don't want to lose their control. They're doing it behind the Americans' backs. And the Republicans are we'll pretend to be on the America's side, but we'll never actually do anything, because that's what always happens. And Democrats always get what they want. And it's funny that they whine and complain, but in the end, they've always gotten what they want. And Donald Trump, in my opinion, is the first time that they stopped getting what they wanted, which is why they're fighting and causing such mayhem right now. So if I was to make a prediction, I think for the most part Donald Trump's going to win. I think there's a lot of crazies left and right, and right now the left is the one that feels like they're backed into a corner, and so the crazies of the left, I think, are reacting, and that's what we're seeing. All this craziness, I think it's going to slow down. I think it's going to stop. I'm not saying immediately, but I'm saying over the course of Donald Trump's time. I think we're gonna see a return to civility, or whatever we'll call it that, and the Republicans, the Democrats, the corporations, the bureaucracy, everyone that is actually causing the problems and the destruction of America's soul, I think they're going into hiding. They're not going to let people know that they're still there. They're going to be quiet for, I don't know, a presidency or two, and then they're going to rear their ugly head, and I think it's going to get bad in a few years. That's my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but that's where I'm going to leave it. If you disagree with anything I said, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Share this video. It really does help. If you like what I do, if you appreciate what I'm trying to do, helping Utah, I want to help restore Utah. Like, we are losing Utah, and just like we're losing every state, but Utah is one of those, like, people see it as this definitive red state. We're not. Okay, watch my other videos. Pay attention to what's going on. We are not a red state. And maybe you're fine not being a red state, and I'm not even necessarily arguing that we are, but what I am saying is there is a facade, and we're not the facade. If you like that facade, look into it, because it's not who we are. If you don't like the facade, maybe you're happy with what's going on. I don't like the facade. I also don't like where we are. So I'm trying to help fight that. So let me know in the comments what you think. Share the video, like, subscribe, do all that. Until next time.